All right, welcome to another installment of the Life Happens podcast. Your hosts, Ryan Dots and Shawnee Mack, a.k.a. the return of the Mac. You know his face from YouTube and you know his voice from iTunes. Sean, another episode.
Excited about it, man. Loving the podcast, loving the whole journey, enjoying all of it.
It really has been fun. The comments, the texts, the everything has been really positive, and the feedback's been great. So let's keep it up. With that being said, this week we're gonna be saying all the COVID stuff that you can't say. It took 4 episodes, but we're dabbling. We're dabbling in conspiracy theory, and it's only conspiracy theory because we don't have the actual figures to prove it. But shit's kind of weird, kind of makes you think, and that's what we do here.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is. We want to talk about the things that aren't getting the airtime, the things that aren't being talked about, right? And with COVID, we've all dealt with it, right? Like you don't even want to hear about it anymore. I get it, trust me. But we have to talk about some of the stuff that's not being talked about, the things that aren't getting airtime that are controlling, kind of the general narrative and the process of lockdowns and everything. So right off the bat, before we even get into what happened with COVID, I think something that most people don't know that I find super interesting was in 2019, before anybody had heard of COVID, all of the big players who controlled the COVID response, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, as well as I want to say the World Health Forum, or the World Economic Forum, hosted what they called Event 201. This was an event to study what would happen if there was a coronavirus pandemic.
Now that's not just an event where they do it all the time, right? They have these events, these trial runs. It's basically practice, right? This is you do it at work, you do fire drill, whatever. The world does do that, but to have it 6 months or whatever prior to an actual full blown outbreak at the beginning of 2020, as everybody remembers, we're just about that 1 year mark right now. So early in Q1 of 2020, to have not only a virus, what do we call it, a test run or a virus,
study, whatever you want to call
study situation, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Training exercise, we'll call it.
Yeah, exactly.
To have that, and then actually be that specific virus, kind of makes you think.
Yeah, it's just a bit odd. It's a little surprising. Oh, hey.
Lana. Hi, Lana.
Sorry about that. So it's again, like you said, they run these studies all the time, right? And this is what they do. They try and prepare. I just personally find it a little odd that all of the people who were responsible for almost the global response to the pandemic, not just here in the U.S., the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is involved everywhere. It's just odd to me that they were hosting this exact trial on something no one had ever heard of right before it happened. So and again, it's just that was never brought up in the media for the past year. I'm willing to bet 99 out of 100 Americans don't know about it.
My first question, honestly, is why the hell is the Bill and Linda Gates Foundation kind of spearheading these exercises outside of like the World Health Organization, obviously, but then the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is hosting their own separate. It's like when Elon Musk went to Mars or went into space or wherever the hell he went with his team. Like, I thought that was just a NASA thing, and so the same logic applies, right? I just thought that was just like this group, like
the
World
CDC
Health Organization
thing.
did this. The CDC, like not Bill Gates. Bill Gates is like, we're running a test.
So, Bill's involved in a lot of things that people don't realize, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been caught doing some sketchy shit in the background in the past. Again, he's one of the people you're not supposed to say bad things about. It's starting to come out now that he may not be this virtuoso that we all think he is. So we're going to dive into that in a later episode, and we're going to really go down the rabbit hole of Bill and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the fabrication of the poor kid starting a story in his garage when his father's rubbing shoulders with billionaires and central bankers. So,
none of that shit actually happened. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that in a separate episode. But for now, I just I find it interesting that this event 201, which is very well documented, never was brought up in the media. I find it interesting that no one touched on this fact. I'd
never heard of it prior to us talking about topics. I personally had never heard about it, and it's fucking Bill Gates. Like,
it seems like a pretty big deal. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And on top of that, there's some other things that we're just doing the intro here. We're talking about pretty much pre-COVID. December 2019, the World Health Organization updates their instructions about what to do to handle a pandemic outbreak. And they say the one thing you should not do is lock down your economy.
Yep.
So again, that wasn't brought up at all. That's not mentioned in the news that the World Health Organization in December of 2019 said don't do lockdowns. Don't know why that hasn't been brought up.
Actually, very specific to the point where they changed the instructions, like kind of a big deal.
Their playbook. Yeah, exactly. And so the reason they did that is because what we haven't been talking about as a society is all of the intangibles, all of the repercussions of the lockdowns, all of the mental health issues, the suicide issues, what we're doing to children, not being able to develop the mental social cues, from reading people's facial expressions and mouths. One stat we have here, I just wrote down on the side, the substance abuse and mental health hotline was up 900%, their phone lines.
It's absolutely insane, especially in 2021, that nobody is talking about that.
Why isn't that front page headlines like that? The mental health of this country is deteriorating at like such a rapid rate due to forced lockdowns. We're social creatures. We're not designed to be locked down. It's right. At the most basic level. Everybody knows that. And the World Health Organization agreed in 2019 we shouldn't be locked down. But here we are a year later, right?
Yeah, it's detrimental to a healthy society, right? Is locking people down, having them completely isolate, all these things. And it was met with a lot of pushback for the right reasons, even though, the motivation might have been incorrect, right? Impeding on my rights, martial law, like this is bullshit. Like I'm an American, this freedom, where's my freedom? Like all that shit, while true, is like it's just loud and just noise. But underneath that, and that's what we're not talking about, but we are today, is, and kind of what we want to focus on, is what the lockdown has done in comparison to the COVID number. So the COVID numbers, the COVID deaths topped over 500,000. Now, like you just said, substance and mental health hotlines, the volume has gone up over 900%. So you would assume that hospitalizations and unfortunate deaths are going to fall in line with those numbers as well.
Yeah, and so that's a part of what's been, the problem here is, deaths getting misallocated as COVID. And I just want to clarify something, because when you talk about anything that is other than the main narrative, and that's a big part of the problem here, is if you challenge anything right now, you're labeled as some psychopath who doesn't give a shit about someone's dying grandmother somewhere. Like, how dare you question the narrative when my grandmother just died last week? Like, yeah, that's not what we're talking about here. I've lost family members from COVID. Ryan's probably lost friends and family members from COVID. Like, everyone has been affected by this thing now. So we're not coming at this from a vantage point of, I don't care about the people that have died. We're coming at this from a vantage point of, is what we have done the best thing for us as a society, a country, and a world, as opposed to, is it just what a few groups have decided we should do and everyone else has fallen in line? Like, no one doesn't care about these deaths. Everyone cares. Nobody wants to see people die. But that doesn't change the fact that deaths have been misallocated as COVID deaths due to the incentive structure that's in place, due to what, like we're saying, what the World Health Forum is doing, what the CDC is doing. And those are just facts.
It comes down to the old adage of, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And, like you said, those wheels are turning a lot faster with those. It's almost gross to say, like, the incentive programs, because it really is the incentive programs. It's like, if you don't want to say cook the books, but let's face facts, like, this shit happens all the time, every single day, and we watch it happen. Now, we're talking about people's lives and equating it to money, which is unfortunate, but that's just
of course
the way of the world. And if it's not discussed, then it's not acknowledged, and, we keep on moving. So hospitals and everything, like states specifically, right? They have the motivation to, even any death that's in question, any illness that's in question, could have been COVID, and it's beneficial. And we could, phrasing it like, we could save someone else's life if we categorize this as a COVID death today.
Yeah. And so also the incentive structures, like, we're not here saying that doctors are inherently evil and they're trying to line their own pockets. No, it's just what happens. If you report a COVID death and your hospital gets money for it, or you report a flu death and you get nothing, which one are a lot of people going to do, right?
And
Like
and
Ryan
the
said,
hospital down the road gets the
gets
funding.
the $1,000, right? So there are incentive structures that have been put in place to lead people to these decisions. It's not that everyone in the medical field is inherently evil, but if you know that you chalk up somebody's death to COVID and there's a 0% chance you're liable for anything to do with malpractice, whereas if it's a flu death, you're fully liable, or if it's any other sort of death, you're liable. Why? And again, your hospital gets funding. Why wouldn't you report it as a COVID case? We built this structure due to all of the relief packages that have made it so it makes perfect sense. It makes the most possible sense for the hospitals to over-report cases as COVID. They get additional funding. They can't be sued for malpractice. Like, it's a structure.
And God forbid you're wrong. God forbid you're wrong, and it actually, the other side of the coin, it was COVID. You missed it. You didn't report it. The upside of the downside, I mean,
yeah.
Again, we're talking about the structure, not any, individual case or area or whatever. It's in your best interest. You'd be a fool, not
It just makes good business sense,
right? And I think that a major part of a lot of the issues that we have is the speed and the amount of misinformation that is shared through media outlets and then social media platforms as well, to the point where we're seeing actual studies. Now, a study used to be that we did a study, here are the results, you're an educated person, you're a smart person, come up with, your own conclusion based on the science, right? Now, that's not happening anymore. Studies are actually being taken down and not shared, I should say, or considered inconclusive.
For that specific purpose. That's the problem. Johns Hopkins has put out, who are very involved in tracking all the data. They've been one of the big sources of a lot of the COVID data, at least here in the U.S. I can't speak.
And they've been a leader, in not throughout history, but you know what I mean. At least recent
modern history of the medical world. So yeah,
exactly. They're one of the front runners. So a very common name in the medical field.
Yeah. And so they had put out a couple studies, and people started drawing their own conclusions of the studies. Not the conclusions that Johns Hopkins wanted people to draw from the studies. And due to that specific reason, not inaccuracies with the data, not inaccuracies with the study, they admitted that due to people coming to their own conclusions about this data that are different than the conclusions they intended, they had to pull the study down. What is that bullshit?
Wait, hold on. Say that again. So to be clear here, so they started the study.
They put out a study.
But let's say they start a study with the intention of a certain result. That in and of itself would negate the study, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely argue that absolutely.
I just from like a basis of like
the most basic principle.
Right. When you're doing a study, you have a hypothesis, right? That's the hypothesis. Let's say that's what was intended, right? Now, when things are things not going their way, the conclusion that they wanted, and it was pulled down, or people made a conclusion opposite of the data. They just didn't look at the data at all.
No. The conclusions people drew were based on the data. They were backed up by the data in the Johns Hopkins study. That's why they were upset.
So confirmed, people still smart. Good to know.
Yeah. So you can still feed people data and let them draw their own conclusions. But yeah, what happens here, and again, this didn't get any airtime. It didn't get any coverage in the media. Johns Hopkins put out a study. People use that data to come to different conclusions, again, based on data. And the study was brought down because of that, because they admitted they didn't like the conclusions people were coming to with the data. And that's just, I mean, it's just
manipulation.
It's manipulation. It's control of the narrative. It's, I hate to be like a tin hat person over here, but you can't just say, I don't like what you're thinking about this thing, I'm going to take it down. Like, I don't like the way you're analyzing this data, so you can't have it.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is like, that's not so much tin hat, only because they put the data out there and they're like, oh shit, people are like pretty smart. People still got it, I guess. And and they were like, we gotta take this down before this, spreads, and screenshots, the shit, because again, if it's out there, it's out there. Like a tweet that was misintended or misread is already screenshot, dude.
Someone's got a screenshot.
Somebody's got a screenshot every single time. So it's like there's absolutely no chance. But our government is pumping numbers. Well, states, starts at the bottom, right? Hospitals are pumping numbers, they're incentivized. States are incentivized because there's 50 states out there. We all need funding. We might as well be a hotbed, right?
Yep.
So now the government is, pumping those numbers up to the point where, annual, biannual lockdowns are a very real conversation for society going forward.
And that's the big concern is they take this to, again, draw their own narrative and put that out into society. The Guardian, fairly popular news source, depending on who you ask, has already been a proponent of this. They said we should have voluntary lockdowns globally every other year to help curb climate change. Now, listen, climate change needs to be addressed. I don't know about you. I'm not cool with voluntary lockdowns every other year going forward for the rest of our lives. That's just unacceptable.
Yeah, I don't understand. Yeah, I wouldn't understand how that would play out, but that's a much bigger picture.
Yeah, but let's circle back a little bit to what we were touching on earlier. You brought it up, which was the unintended consequences of all of this, all of these lockdowns and what's happened, and all of the other areas where this has permeated to. So talking about specifically, they locked down the economy, which just puts hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people out of work. I forget the exact figures.
Yep, we saw that happen.
Yeah, and those people get the unemployment benefits from the government, right? They get their stimulus checks, little stimmy checks, and that's great. But we have shut down the economy, and for every, I want to say it's for every 1% tick up in unemployment, there's an additional 10 to 20,000 deaths in the country due to a variety of reasons. Suicide. Was it 40? I can't quite remember. It's 40.
It's 40,000.
So for every 1% uptick in unemployment, and granted, I think we went up 7%. From 4 to 11. I forget what the peak unemployment number was off the top of my head. But, you're talking 40,000 deaths per 1%. We went up 8%, 320,000 deaths right there. Okay, 550,000 total due to COVID. Again, you can't just make the numbers that simple. I understand it's immensely more complicated.
I don't know. You just did. That seemed pretty good to me.
But again, that's not mentioned. No one's talking about the fact that people die more frequently in a recession, which we basically forced ourselves into a recession by closing the economy.
Yep, and these numbers will continue to tick up as we attempt to recover. We kind of did a short-term solution and created a long-term problem.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, these are the things we've talked about in other episodes and we'll continue to talk about in the future. But these big government programs always benefit bigger businesses and not, Main Street, not the small guy. Well, every mom and pop restaurant was closed. Every local retailer was closed. Walmart remained open. Amazon remained open. Stop and Shop remained open. You name it, they're still open. Who gets to decide what's essential and what's not? Why is my local grocer not essential, but Walmart is essential? Like, why is the restaurant down the street not essential, but McDonald's is?
Because those guys paid to play. So, like they do have that blanket statement, right? They have the essential workers, which to me mean police, fire, like everything that, not everything your taxes pay for, but you know what I mean. Like, so
yeah, medical professionals as
medical
well.
Professionals,
plus all the tax stuff.
Police, fire, school, right? Police, fire, shit like that. Like, outside of that, like, yeah, exactly. What makes that giant superstore that has, the capacity of what could be 5,000 people? They're held to 50%. You can still have 2,500 people in there. Where the mom and pop shop, who can only hold 20 people, have to close. They're closed. You're not essential because you don't sell toilet paper, because you don't sell jugs of water. You know what I mean? Yep. They were able to deem themselves essential because they're in the room and they get a say when the decisions are being made.
And exactly. So we touched on this previously, but all of these programs always benefit. Everyone wants to talk about, right? Like, what are we going to do to stop Amazon? What are we going to do to stop Walmart? How do we get back to small business? People talk about it all the time, but then it's right there staring them in the face. The government shuts down all the small businesses, keeps Amazon open, and everyone goes, oh, okay, I'll just do all my shopping on Amazon. And listen, I did too, because it was the only thing open.
But I ordered Amazon today.
We got to talk about this shit. The government just blanketly deciding what's essential, what's not essential. Your restaurant can open at 25 capacity this week. Nope, close next week. Nope, sorry, right. 40% the following week. it's just lunacy, and you can't expect these small businesses to survive on it.
And that's another thing too, right? So, um, the financial toll of the ever changing, we call it the moving target, right? The moving
Oh my
target
God.
of what's a regulation, what's not, right? So from 60% to 40% to you have to close down. We got to close for a week. Let's just take the restaurant just because it's the biggest one, it's the most controversial, right? Your entire inventory is thrown out. The second that they say, you know,
Oh yeah.
got to close for a week, got to close for 3 days. I had a staff member who tested positive. That's 2 weeks. Each and every time, you have to completely restock everything. That in of itself is an insane cost. People coming in and out of your business, those are all projected numbers. That it's a small business. It's me. It's you. It's my neighbor down the street. Is he a financial guru? No, he's not. He's doing his books, and then this change happens. He doesn't know how long it's going to last, and he gets eaten up. Now these major corporations can take the hits like that
Yeah,
because
they can go reach out to the public debt markets, right, and take on $100 billion in additional debt, just
they
issue
can
some equity or
they can literally
whatever.
do that. Right, they literally have those options. But a 5 to 10% drop in business in a perfect world, a 5 to 10% drop for a small business is a death sentence.
Yeah, that could kill a lot of businesses, especially the ones that were shut down. Restaurants, the industry I know well, they operate on a shoestring budget. Most of them, everyone thinks like because of this celebrity chef craze that people who run restaurants are rich. It could not be the case. Could not be
No,
any
there's no
further from the
way.
case. And look at, for example, for anybody who's familiar with the Boston restaurant scene, if we got any listeners out there, shout out Boston. Two of the most, I would say, prominent restaurants in the industry in Boston that everyone knows, Eastern Standard Kitchen and Island Creek Oyster Bar, were two wildly successful restaurants in Boston, operated maybe 10, 15 years now. One of them right next to Fenway, right in Kenmore Square, packed every single night. They
I would
made
say for
it.
the. Oh, God, sorry.
No, they made it till last month. They survived through the entire pandemic, never reopened, burned through all the money they had, tried to push through. They made it till February, closed, filed bankruptcy, and in March, the news comes out that restaurants in Boston can open without any capacity restrictions. So like these places are doing everything they can to just try and get by. And then when they finally throw their hands up, the government's like, "Oh, just kidding, you can open."
That's the other thing, and that's a great point. Um, Nobody told these businesses what to do, just that they were closed.
Yeah, there was no contingency plan in place. It was just you have to close indefinitely. Best of luck. File for a
Good.
PPP loan.
Right, we'll see you on the other side. Right, exactly. Now, mind you, and we talked about these numbers last few episodes ago, the $4 trillion, but it only takes about 400 billion to pay the Americans. So where's the other money going? All those big corporations are getting those breaks. The $2 million that we talked about, if you file for 1.9, nobody asked any questions, shit like that. Like your average Joe, one, doesn't know how to do that. Two, doesn't have a lawyer who can look through it all. Like all that shit. They have teams. I mean, it's David versus Goliath, right? And Goliath is your own government that you're paying into. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah, and on top of that, like we said, these big businesses have access to the debt markets, right? So a Walmart can go out there and issue a bond, like the government does,
Yep.
and pay 2% interest on the bond. And in the background, our Federal Reserve is buying their bonds. So Walmart issues debt. The government essentially buys that debt and keeps Walmart afloat while Walmart is made the only business in town because everyone else is closed. So like they're double dipping all over the place, and again, it's just not being talked about. Like,
No, not at all.
and
Um, the only point that I kind of want to mention before we move on, right, is you said who gets to decide who's essential, and we do
yeah,
have a note here about what makes COVID special. I do want to talk about that a little bit because
yeah,
COVID obviously hit. Flu-like symptoms. People are like it's the flu. The flu numbers are non-existent.
there has been no flu this year.
There has been no flu this year. I think maybe
Which,
like 100 something cases, like an
granted,
insane number.
granted, we've all been locked down. People haven't been going out as much, so the cases were obviously going to drop. But the flu cases and death had been ticking up. 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. You can plotted on a chart. It's there. The data's there. And then all of a sudden in 2020, the flu was completely eradicated. So good job, guys.
Literally, we beat the flu.
We have beaten the flu.
We've been locked down for a year, but
no longer a thing you need to be. But not Walmart. Walmart's been open. Everyone's been going there touching shit. Like if you're gonna get the flu.
And we've talked about this offline. It's that second part of our note. Why don't we try to prevent other preventable diseases? Like,
right? Why aren't we taking a hard line on obesity?
Every couple years or every year, I'm just imagining the paperwork. Every couple years, everyone lobbies for a disease. What's the biggest killer? What this, that, and the other thing, and we've proven it now with the vaccine, with the full vaccinations just came out today. That people that are fully vaccinated after 2 weeks of their second shot no longer are required to wear masks and can basically frolic indoors with other vaccinated people. You're all good, right?
Yeah.
Why don't we just launch money at the one thing that we all picked?
Yep.
And we'll just slowly start chipping away.
If they really cared about health and they really cared about people, they would have been putting programs in place to help take care of the top killers in this country for years and years and years, but they have not. And if COVID, circle back really quick to the inflated cases, if COVID was really as big and scary and dangerous as they say it is, we wouldn't need to inflate the cases with these incentive programs incentivizing hospitals to over-report COVID cases.
Right. The idea of an incentive program in a hospital makes absolutely no sense.
Well, maybe if there was a 70% fatality rate, or 70% survival rate, but again, we're talking about something with a 99.7% survival rate. Mm-hmm. They just came out with a study today. The CDC just came out with a study today that said they compared the data in counties that didn't issue a face mask mandate to the counties that did issue a face mask mandate. The ones that had a face mask mandate saw COVID grow 1.3% slower than non-masked counties. That's it. And that's the CDC's data. Like that's otherworldly. And that brings us to Florida, right? Because we can't have a COVID episode and not talk about Florida, because that's really the shit you can't say.
Florida is
doing what
as always, anytime there is a US, like something with the US, everyone's like, what's Florida doing?
Florida's just fucking doing Florida, man. So Florida.
Florida.
Yeah. And they do it well. They pulled back their mask mandate. I don't even know, like 8 months ago, Fauci said they were flirting with death or something crazy like that. So California has had the most draconian lockdowns, the strictest lockdowns outside of New York, probably in the United States. Europe's been way worse.
Florida, but their entire structure is different. We got to, what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Europe's
Oh, I thought you meant California to Florida.
Oh no, Europe, Europe. When everyone when Europe was we're locking down, everyone's like, we gotta lock down.
But I mean, so Florida has been, I think 8 or 9 months now with no mask mandate. People just doing what the hell they want. Business open, restaurant open, people partying. Florida has had less deaths per million people and less cases per million people than California. So when you adjust for the population, they have still had less both cases and deaths than California, which is under the strictest lockdowns. So what's up with that? What's going on there?
I can't imagine that there's a good answer. The only, and I literally I'm just thinking about this at the top of my head, is like the percentage of people that are visiting Florida versus there full time that would either contract it, get it, whatever, and then
go back
and head back home, and then their numbers go up.
Yeah, that's fair, but California is a pretty big travel destination too.
Not if you lock everything up.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
You know what I mean? Like you can't. I mean, California is, and not to be dramatic, like they're shut down, like done.
Well, it's better now, but for a while,
I was gonna say, but they were for a while. Like you couldn't do it. I mean, I know you were actually out there at the beginning. Like,
yeah,
it was could move.
It's significant, and the people just reacted differently because there was maybe it's just the population difference in the demographic, maybe it's the way they react, but the feeling in California was one of much more fear. It was palpable compared to the East Coast. All the cities I've been to on the East Coast since moving back, a palpable difference in the fear, absolutely. But again, that's not getting airtime, right? We're trying to give some airtime. No lockdowns, less cases. There could be confounding variables, but
But that's with any argument. Like why
Oh yeah.
why isn't Florida getting the same airtime? Florida's just been getting shit on for a year.
Oh yeah.
When in reality, with the exception of the thought I just came up with, no one's even having the conversation.
No, it's not on any major media news network, right? You know what else isn't on there? The fact that when Biden, not when he quote unquote won the election, but when they certified his victory, because there was all the fight over who actually won and all
Right.
that.
Yeah. Yep.
Cases peaked in this country the day they certified Biden's election victory. Again, I'm going to sound like a tin hat person.
That's mid-December, right?
Yeah, but mid-December isn't the end of winter.
December 20th.
Oh no, actually no, it was the first couple days in January is when they actually like certified the victory officially.
Okay. Okay.
So the day that he was officially certified is the day cases peaked in this country. And again, January 7th isn't the end of winter. We haven't made it through the seasonality yet because people would argue, well, it's seasonal, right? It's going to go down. But since when is January 7th spring?
It's dead of winter to me.
So, I mean, that's interesting. On top of that, so I'm going to go rabbit hole a little bit for a second. Everyone knows, or most people know by now due to all of the media talk, that the PCR test is what's used to test for COVID in a person. They're looking to find basically
That's
traces.
the nose dunk?
Yeah, it's the thing. And then the test that they put the nose dunk in is then called a PCR test.
Got it.
The way it works, and listen, I am not a freaking scientist, but I have read a lot about it because I find it fascinating. The way it works is they take your sample and they amplify it up many, many times to try and find what's inside there. Because if you just take a nose swab and stick it in, the tester, maybe there's not enough there to test it. There's not enough of the bacteria to find it.
Sure.
So they have to amplify it up. And so what happened is, again, right after Biden's victory was certified, they changed the recommendation for the cycles that you're supposed to run. So they literally, by definition, they changed the way you test to ensure that there would be fewer positive cases because you're going to cycle it less, right? You're going to run the test fewer cycles. That means you're going to find less COVID. That means there's going to be fewer cases. And they did that pretty much the day after Biden's victory was certified. After it started to come out that the dude who created the PCR test said it shouldn't be used to identify viruses. Said that you could find anything.
That's not great for that test.
He said that you could find anything with a PCR test if you amplified it enough or cycled it enough, as they've been calling it. So again, that doesn't get any airtime, but whatever. I'm going to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I'm still going to put it out there.
I would tell you if you sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but these things actually happened. Like if
it's all documented.
If you're looking for fire, you eventually will find it, regardless of the means you took to get there. Right now, this is what sounds weird, and again, we're middle of the road show. Like Trump, the whole time leading up to the election, was like, less testing. Why are we testing? Less testing. Now, that's just a clip. That's just a clip, right? Or a sound bit, I'll say. But what took place, like the actions and the mandates that they made, that's less testing. That's stopping testing.
Yeah, because by definition, there will be fewer tests. If there are fewer tests, people are going to freak out less. There's going to be fewer people going for tests. If there's only 5 cases of COVID in your county, you're probably not too concerned, right? So you're not going to go get tested. If you have a sniffle, you probably just think I have a cold. We go back to normal life where when you cough, you don't think, oh shit, I have COVID. You just think, oh, maybe I'm sick.
To the point where you look at the map and you see hotspots and you're like, pieces of shit. Like you're like, they're not doing their job, like blah blah blah, because you see the little blue circles and you're like, these people ridiculous. When in reality, your community is just going by the guidelines. They haven't gotten there yet. They're still doing the zoomed in testing. Like it could be any number of things, but in reality, like the perception is everything, right? Trump goes up, he goes, no more testing, no more testing, no more testing. It's like, dude, you sound dumb. If you had just applied it like this team over here.
If you had brought some sort of science to it instead of just
you
saying we have to stop testing.
Because we stopped
like
testing.
A psycho saying we have to stop testing. So to be clear, we are not saying stop testing.
No. Keep testing.
Maybe test with the correct cycle threshold. So
I tested positive. I can't get a test Until 90 days after my quarantine ended because of the antibodies and shit. Just can't get it.
Yeah,
Literally tried.
it's to the same token, the cycle thresholds aren't getting any news and whatever. That's fine. It's a little complex for the layman. They don't want to deal with it. What
Right.
about the hundreds or thousands of doctors who have come out and spoken out against the lockdowns and the COVID measures? Like, what about all? Do their opinions just not matter? Like, there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of doctors in this country, let alone worldwide, who've said like these lockdowns are going to cause more deaths than COVID. It's not as serious as they're making it out to be. It's still a serious virus, but it's just not as serious as they're making it out to be. Like, do their medical opinions not matter?
Discredited.
Like, they're doctors. Like, why do their opinions not matter? I don't know.
It's I'm interested to see because like it's not that they like don't matter. It's just that it didn't, like you said, they didn't fit the. I don't want to
The
say
narrative.
herding narrative, but I also want to say sheeple. It's like so
Yeah.
bad. But I think it would discredit me as a short term podcast host. Like, but it's true. It's like the entire narrative is completely controlled, and then with people pulling down the studies or the companies, researchers pulling down studies because they didn't like the results, they didn't like what was being shared. People screaming at the top of their lungs like this shit happens all the time.
How about there were many accounts that got banned from Twitter very early on when COVID had just broken and we all got put into lockdowns for suggesting the idea that this came out of a lab in China. It wasn't that crazy people eating bat soup bullshit they tried to feed everyone. And these people were banned from Twitter. They could not have their voices heard. And then it comes out a year later that the CDC is like, yeah, it probably came out of a lab in China. So like, where's the fucking fairness?
That's yeah.
People
You
can't even
can't
suggest an idea without being silenced.
you
What?
when you see you scroll on your timeline, right, and you see something stupid, you see a stupid meme, you go, "That's stupid," and you keep moving.
And you just keep going.
But that guy's got to be able to be heard too. Like if he thinks he has something, just on the off chance he's right, you know,
You can't not let him talk.
unless it's hold on, unless it's hate speech or just aggressive,
Yeah.
like you know what I mean. Like we're talking about, I don't want to say normal people, but like the show's for average Joes. Like this is what we're talking about, right? If you're spewing hate speech, turn off our podcast. Do not listen to our show. We don't want you to be a part of this. Like, but if you truly believe in exactly what we're talking about, which a year ago sounded insane.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
why?
if
Like
you had said that a year ago, imagine the reaction from the average person. And I get that, right? Because it was so crazy and we had never been in this situation as a society before and no one knows how to react. So people
it's
react with
amazing.
fear. Yeah, fear is a powerful control device, right? And
And
that's my biggest problem with this whole thing is they have people living in a perpetual state of fear. And I think it's unfounded to the level that it's currently seen in society. I'm not saying that people don't need to be fearful of the virus. I'm saying that I think people don't need to be nearly as fearful as they are.
oh, fear has been utilized as a weapon at
And
this point.
I think I honestly think it's sad that they've been able to make people so fearful of their neighbor, to make people call the police on their neighbor because they had 5 cars in the driveway. Like that, I hate hearing that shit.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the extremism. We always say the 90%, like, and it applies for every situation, right? You got the careless asshole at the bar who's coughing on everybody, just being a douche, or the woman who's in her window peeking through her blinds, calling because there's 3 cars in the driveway, and that's more than 5 people for sure. She saw 6 walk out. Like, it, it's terrible, and it's unfortunate, and those are the stories. Those are the people. Those are the ones that are heard the most because they're so interesting one way or another, whether it's negative or positive, right? It's
yeah,
people are tuning into it.
yeah, and we know that's all it is. They all care about getting headlines, clicks, and that's at the most basic level all that matters to them in the media. I mean, if you don't believe it, I just saw a great tweet about it yesterday.
Revenue drives.
No, in '87, I think it was when no, it must have been the '90s. I'm sorry, it was in the '97 when there was those 5 black kids in New York who were accused of beating and raping a woman. something along those lines. And Trump, again, we're not Trump haters here. I could give two
No,
shits about Trump, to be
I don't
honest.
give a shit.
Um,
It's never one person. That's what
the
we
same
always
way I
say.
feel about Biden, I could give two shits about Biden.
I
But
don't get
Trump took
Biden's an
out
idiot.
full page spreads in all the major newspapers, all the progressive ones, the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Times, um, calling for more or less the lynching of these kids. Like, guess what? They all took his money. They all ran his ads, calling for
Yeah.
basically the death of these 5 black kids. Like, all they give a shit about is money at the end of the day. I'm sorry. It sucks, but it's the reality. So
Oh yeah.
they're gonna hype everything up as much as possible, whether it has any basis in reality, because that's going to drive ratings, is going to drive money. And they've done the exact same thing with COVID.
I think journalistic integrity has been completely thrown out the window in every
Absolutely.
facet of media. It's unbelievable. Like we always say, I mean, we've been a short-lived show, but like we always say, we call it like it is, right? Like if there's money on the table, we're gonna take it. If you're not gonna run it, we're gonna find someone who will.
Yep.
So, your moral compass can only go so far when you've got bills to pay, you've got shit to do, like it's your dream job, like that shit weighs on you. Even if you're like to the highest moral standard, right?
Yeah.
That shit is gonna weigh you down and bury you eventually. It's unfortunate, but it's realistic, and that's why we talk about the topics here, is because like we're not get paid. So if anyone
Well,
wants to run an ad, no, I'm kidding.
we're imperfect creatures trying to create a perfect world, right? And all this, we're humans. We just have faults like every other animal. And to pretend like people aren't swayed by money, in journalism or in any field, like it's to the point now where I think everyone in this country would probably argue you have a harder time finding an unbiased piece of journalism than you do finding a biased piece of journalism, right? It's
You,
how hard is it to find a truly unbiased independent media source in this country?
I can tell you, it won't have 1/10 the clicks of whatever celebrity fucking ate with somebody else.
Kendall Jenner's lunch bill or
If
whatever.
I see one more fucking ad about Kendall Jenner's next step, like what? Kim and Kanye broke up. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? They never even saw each other. They're on different parts of the earth. Like they stay in different parts of the earth. Who gives a shit? Like people are dying on a daily basis from suicide, like deteriorating mental health, substance abuse, addiction,
You name it.
physical and verbal abuse in the household. Domestic violence is up,
Oh yeah.
astronomical amounts. Like all of it, and just to put a bow on it, it's like that really should be more of the focus. Is in a year in lockdown, and I'll be interested to see how the data comes out, because while we were talking, I was looking it up. The latest data is from 2018, like from 28 over the last 2 years consistently. The suicide rate per 100,000 has gone up like 6 or 7% consistently each year, and that's before this shit. Like it's a very, very real concern. And at what point do you have to ask yourself, was this for the better of the country? Was it better, like for the better of the American people, that we locked down? Because, like you said, Florida is frolicking. Maybe they just got lucky. Who knows? Nobody's gonna know until way down the line. But it does seem that there could have been things done a lot differently that we just didn't do. But the main message is you have to give the people the information and let them decide.
Exactly. And that's what this country is supposed to be founded upon, is less government control and more personal freedom. That's the most basic principle of what this country was originally meant to be. And we've gotten so far away from that people now will take anything the government says blindly, even if they tell them you have to quarantine in your own house. If you haven't been exposed to any virus, you need to lock yourself down in your own house. And our main point here is the sooner we start asking questions, the sooner people start drawing their own conclusions based on the available data,
Mm-hmm.
the sooner we get back to society as some sort of normalcy and we stop living in a perpetual state of fear. People just need to start questioning. First off, I am a big fan of the saying just question everything. Like if
Yeah.
you want to deeply understand something, ask more questions, ask better questions. But we're in a society now where people don't question anything. to a fault of us as a people. People start asking questions. They find different answers than the answers they're being given. And the sooner we get back to that, the sooner we'll get back to some sort of normalcy in our lives. And I just don't like seeing what these lockdowns are doing to people, to their mental health, to the way they're treating their neighbors, to the way people act towards one another, where we've been like dehumanized.
You nailed it.
Lockdown. And it's very sad to watch. I don't like to see it.
The sense of community over the past year is all but foregone at this point. Whatever was going on in the world, whatever was going on in the country or whatever else, was kind of not a distant thought because it was reality, but you still had your local community where it almost seemed like, you had a little bit of a separation there, and you could enjoy your day to day. That's all but gone. Like,
yeah,
all anyone talks about nowadays is COVID, the numbers, expectations, what happened, what's bullshit, what's not. Like, when was it last time you had a conversation with somebody about anything other than our current state? You know what I mean?
Something to do with COVID.
Yeah, it's always and if it doesn't start that way, it always comes back around that way. Like, it's unbelievable, and it's really, really unfortunate, and a term that I learned very early on in my career, or like a phrase more or less, but that trust but verify. You kind of nailed it. It's like start asking questions. It's like trust but verify. That's exactly what the the average American needs to do. You may not understand it. Don't watch that next episode of Netflix. Just take the 40 minutes, look it up, understand it a little bit better, because you are going to be presented with a situation where you either wished you knew about it, wished you could talk about it more, and stuff like that. It's like just take the time, listen to our podcast.
Yeah, most importantly, listen to the
Take that 45 minutes and kind of talk with us, and we'll all come together and we'll all figure it out. If everybody brings 10%, eventually we'll get to 100. That's science. It's math, but
either way.
Right. Obviously, this is great topic. Something that we're going to dive into a little bit more. Bill Gates, we're coming for you. And we're gonna tie this all together on the next episode. But up until that time, what is it? The Life Happens podcast, Instagram, Twitter. Go ahead, do your thing.
Yeah, so Life Happens podcast on Instagram, a little shorter on Twitter. The Life Happens pod, because they got that username limit on Twitter. So
shout out, pod.
Keep everything short and sweet. And make sure you find us on iTunes as well, right? Life Happens podcast. Throw us a like, give us a subscribe. Like, we really appreciate it. We're having a lot of fun doing this, and we hope we're putting some information out there that you guys appreciate. And you know what? If you want to join us with the video, come check us out on YouTube, man. The Life Happens podcast on YouTube. Throw us a comment and hop in, and join the conversation.
Let us know.
Let's talk about it.
Seriously, let's talk about it, because life happens. Like, YouTube's the best when we do like a YouTube premiere, because the live comments are so great. We do misspeak or like say something incorrect a lot. It's mostly me. It's on my end. That's why I stopped talking so much. Like, but to see those come in, like between that, suggestions, topic recommendations, all of it's awesome. Subscribe. It's totally free, and it goes above and beyond for us. So
yeah, we hugely appreciate it.
Yeah, but thank you guys so much, and until next week.
Yeah, until next week. Ask questions.